Good evening, everyone. It's now 7 p.m. and I'd like to welcome members, officers and our public tuning into tonight's live feed of this Planning, Transport, Regeneration, Overview and Scrutiny Committee, the 7th of September 2020. Right, firstly, I would like to start by saying it's a huge thank you for the opportunity to chair this PTR committee. It's both very much a privilege and an honour for me to do so. I would just like to also make another thing clear, and that is to ask all elected members to please refrain from using political references and any point scoring, as we're here to represent Thurrock and its population and not political parties. And lastly, in my opening of this PTR committee, I must say that I'm very disappointed that my invitation to both the Chief Executive and Finance Director to this meeting tonight to answer questions on the huge overspend of the A13 has been completely ignored, which I find most disrespectful to myself as chair. Okay, we can proceed. I see we've got a full members tonight, so there's no apologies for any absence. We have Councillor Gerrish on Teams. Minutes. Can we approve the correct record of minutes of the Planning, Transport, Regeneration, Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting that was held on the 6th of July 2020? Agreed? Okay, there's no items of urgent business. Can we have a declaration of interest? No declarations of interest. Okay, and we can go straight on to back in Thurrock, a 5-year strategy of economic recovery, resilience and a return to growth on pages 13 to 32.
Chair, good evening. And before I ask my colleagues to present firstly the report on the economic development strategy, but then also on the local plan, just to say a few words, if I may, just to put the two reports into context, because it's actually quite helpful, I think, and useful that those two reports are before you this evening, because they're interrelated. We all know about the unfortunate impacts of a global pandemic on the economy, the global economy, and Thurrock is obviously affected in its own way by those impacts. But even before COVID-19, we were looking at the need to refresh our economic development strategy so as to ensure sustainable economic growth and the benefits that accrue from that going forward in our communities. But of course, the global pandemic has led to that being even more necessary, and very much the paper that Stephen will present in a moment will be looking at that long-term strategy, as well as looking at the short-term needs to ensure that we can get through as quickly as possible a period of recovery and then move into growth. Sitting alongside the economic development strategy, the local plan, which you've been aware of, the refresh of that for a while now, is going to be equally important at the spearhead of bringing forward recovery and growth. The second report in front of you tonight that Lee will present will put an update as to where we are in terms of refresh of that local plan. And the two reports, as I say, do sit very neatly together, as they will start to drive forward as quickly and as quickly as possible that period of recovery and into sustainable growth beyond. That's not to suggest that those two documents are the be-all and end-all of that strategy, but very much they sit at the spearhead. But there's a whole range of other really important documents that we'll need to create and work with a whole range of partners, whether they be internal or external, to bring forward, whether that be the health and wellbeing strategy, whether that be active place, whether that be transport strategy. All of them integrated and brought together in the appropriate manner will achieve our ambitions of making Thurrock a great place to work and a great place to live. So hopefully, Chair members, that puts a bit of context onto the two reports. And at that stage, with your agreement, Chair, I'll pass over to Stephen to talk about the Economic Development Strategy report.
Thank you, Andy. And Stephen, if you could present the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andy. So this report before you today is the first part of a refreshed economic development strategy. What it tries to do is set the scene, first and foremost. So it's talking about where we were before COVID hit and before the pandemic. And I think I could sum that up by saying that we were doing pretty well. There were issues that we wanted to look at. So we needed to look at productivity in the economy. We needed to look at skills. We need to look at technological change and what that would mean. But we were doing okay. Clearly, COVID hit earlier this year, and it's had a huge impact on the economy in Thurrock, as it has across the country and indeed across the world. The report tries to summarise some of those particular impacts and concerns that we have. I think probably something that I'm sure we'll touch on today is around jobs and the impact on jobs and the claimant count in Thurrock. But clearly there are a number of other impacts as well. The strategy then goes on to talk about some immediate actions that we are taking or at the moment or have taken to try and support the economy and local people. And it then goes on to talk about how we want to develop the medium and longer term actions, which we want to do in a very collaborative way with our communities and with our stakeholders and with our key anchor businesses in the community. We want to work with them to develop and co-produce an implementation plan, which will set out how we're going to work in the medium and longer term, and which we would bring back to committee in due course, along with a final copy of the strategy for your consideration. The reason we want to work in that way, I think there's a number of reasons, but first and foremost in my mind is that we don't control all the levers of the economy, that actually it's the ports, it's the big businesses, it's the small businesses, it's a number of other stakeholders that are going to drive demand for jobs, are going to be looking at how they can change how they're working to work and successfully in a sort of post-COVID world. We need to be working with them to understand what those concerns are and understand what we can do to support them in the change process. I think as well, of course, that they all bring some of the resources to the table that we might need to make some of those changes. So it's about not just about money. I think it's in terms of access to staff, access to their facilities. It's about understanding the information that they've got and the data that they've got that they can share with us to tell us what's going on in the economy and how we might want to work differently in the future to make sure that Thurrock is a success and continues to be a success economically going forward. As I say, the strategy is in two parts. This is the first part, and it would go for consultation at the same time as we are working on the implementation plan, and we've been bring both back to you for consideration. Be really interested to hear what feedback members have got, first of all, on the strategy and what you're hearing from residents and from businesses that we should be taking account of. Particularly interested in that, particularly interested in hearing where you think we should prioritise the capacity that we've got and where you think we should focus our work, both developing the strategy and then in the sort of longer term. And we'd also welcome your comments, particularly on the approach to engagement, because clearly we've got to do this differently to how we would have run a consultation on the strategy a year ago. We've got to do it much more through virtual discussions and much more through sort of online means. So again, any particular comments or thoughts you've got about that would be particularly welcome.
Lovely, thank you, Stephen. I'll start by asking a question myself, and then I'll open up to other members. So my question to you, Stephen, would be on tonight's recovery document that you've just read. How does this plan mesh with the economic recovery proposal submitted by the Association of South Essex Local Authorities?
Thank you, Chair. So the document, the answer is that it has to link entirely with that with that document. Clearly, the South Essex local authorities are having discussions about the recovery prospectus, which ASLA produced. Actually, I go to weekly meetings with the other economic development managers across South Essex to talk about a number of issues and opportunities that arise. But actually, certainly something that's on our agenda is how we can work together across South Essex to try and drive economic recovery and growth. And clearly, that's about making sure that this our Thurrock strategy ties into what the ASLA strategy is saying and reflects that strategy, but it also needs to reflect the particular nuances or interests that we might have in Thurrock as well, that might not be so relevant across the whole of South Essex. So I think for us particularly, clearly we've got a big focus on the ports and on our logistics sector, so that will be something that we would have a particular interest in. I know it's reflected in the ASLA strategy, but it's something that we in particular would want to be looking at.
Thank you for that, Stephen. Also, I understand that Essex County Council is trying to force through local government reform in a pan-Essex model, which will have a serious negative impact on Thurrock. Can we have more details on how we can avoid Essex County Council messing these recovery plans up?
Chair, perhaps I can pick that particular one up, if I may. Is that okay? Members will be aware that there is a lot of talk around about local government reform and reorganisation across the country. The government's promising a white paper that will look into the possibility of what that might look like in terms of those reforms. I believe it might be as early as October, but I think it's more likely November from what I hear now. So it's very much sort of work in progress. We haven't got any detail on that. I think the key point for me is whatever the wider landscape in terms of LEPs, in terms of the possibility of local government reform in whatever way that might take shape, working with bodies like the Thames Estuary Growth Board, Opportunity South Essex, there will be a variety of key stakeholders in place we will have to be working with to ensure that the strategy itself can be delivered and implemented in an effective way. That landscape over the lifetime of the strategy will change almost inevitably. How, I don't know, but it will. And that's why, amongst other things, I think there's some real sense in this particular document and the approach, which looks at a longer term strategy with a series of implementation plans that can change and adapt according to changing circumstance, whatever that might be. So in effect, yes, we must always keep our eye to that wider position, things that might well change in structurally as well as economically, and be ready and light on our feet to be able to react to them. But at this moment in time, go back to your substantive question about local government reform, we wait to see what white paper brings later on this year.
Thank you, Andy. I think we just need to make sure that Essex County Council doesn't have that serious negative impact on us here in Thurrock, and I'm sure you'll ensure that doesn't happen. Okay, right. If we can move on then. Questions? I'll open the floor to Councillor Kerry.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of questions. Would you like me to ask them all in one go, or just ask each one and get responses?
How would you like to do them, officers? Would you like them? Okay.
And apologies for not facing you, but for the benefit of the mic, I'll stay here. So, firstly, you said this is a refreshed report, and rightly so with COVID. But there's a number of sort of issues that Thurrock faces, which it was facing before COVID hit. For example, on page 20, it already says that the claimant count was rising to 3% in January 2020. And obviously, since then, the claimant count has shot up, and that, you'd expect that with COVID. But there are some systemic issues within Thurrock that were there before COVID and have been exacerbated by it, but they were there anyway. So are there any particular programmes you can point to which this council is using to try and reduce that claimant count to begin with? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So the answer is yes, there are things that we're doing already to try and work on the help address the issue with the claimant count. If I give you a couple of examples. One is within Tilbury in particular, we've managed to access funding to support what's called a community-led local development programme in Tilbury. It's particularly about helping people move towards and into the labour market. Now, it might be that projects within that programme might not be taking people all the way there. They might be about things like building confidence, building motivation, understanding what training needs you've got, etc. But through the programme as a whole, there's the ambition to move people through and into the labour market in that programme. It's got another 2 or 3 years to run. It's already been running for over a year now, actually, and it's got another couple of years to run. And we're actually looking at the moment about whether we can use some of the money that remains in the budget to run another bidding round for projects which could particularly address some of the issues that have arisen through the COVID pandemic. So that's one example. A second example is we have the Thurrock Opportunities website, which is essentially it draws down information on local jobs that are advertised on the web through there's a particular sort of brokerage for these things, and it draws that information for Thurrock down, and it promotes jobs that are available to people in Thurrock in the immediate area. It also contains information about training courses and other bits and pieces of useful information that we can share with people. We need to develop that website. At the moment, it does those jobs, but I think we need to develop it a bit more, and we certainly need to promote it. I think before COVID, the audience, the way of promoting it would be slightly different because the audience was probably relatively small, and so you could do it through intermediaries and so on and so forth. Clearly, as you say, claimant count's gone up significantly. It's a much larger audience. We need to be promoting it out there more widely in the community. It's something that we're looking at the moment. We have been promoting it, but we'd like to promote it much more. So there are a couple of examples.
Thank you, and thanks for that answer. And from my interpretation of your answer is that a lot of the work is being geared towards identifying jobs for Thurrock residents, which is important. I'm thinking about the type of jobs, because on page 21, on the second bullet point, it does. There's a key line there, which is something that many of us have known has been around much before COVID, but it suggests that the jobs people do in Thurrock are less resilient to economic shock. So, and then you look on page 20, and it talks positively about the rise in jobs to 78,000. I just wonder how many of the increased jobs, do we have figures on how many of these jobs are precarious, and how many could withstand the COVID shock, or how many are just gone now because they're not resilient enough?
Thank you. So I don't have specific information about which of those jobs might have gone or might be temporarily gone because of COVID. But you're absolutely right that one of the things we've got to look at is resilience of the jobs that we've got available in the economy, and try and work with our big employers to see what we can do to make them more resilient. I think if you think about what COVID did, particularly in the lockdown, you can see that the jobs that would be less resilient are the ones where you had to go out of the house to do them in a lot of instances. So I think they are a particular issue in terms of this particular outbreak, but actually, as you say, the last time we had an economic shock, we also saw quite a significant rise in the claimant count in Thurrock, and there was that point about the resilience of jobs. I think some of it comes down to skills, actually, that people have, and the transferable skills, and how we can help people develop those transferable skills so they're able to move from those jobs to the ones that are still operating and running in whatever circumstance we're in. We know from feedback from the members of the business board and elsewhere that it's the impact of COVID is being felt particularly in certain sectors and certain industries, and there are others that are doing okay. And what we need to do is get people in a position where they can move to those places where it's okay.
If I can just come in there, Councillor Kerry. Now, I think it's important that we sort of look at local people and putting those local people into those local jobs. As we know, it's great for the local economy to have, like I suggested earlier in our pre-meeting, you can put £5 into the corner shop, and that very same £5 can come back into your pocket 2 months down the line, because the money generally stays within the local economy anyway. So I think we should ideally be focusing, looking at these jobs and looking at putting local people into them. Thank you. And Councillor Kerrin, if you'd like to come back.
Is that okay? Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your indulgence here. And you mentioned the Tilbury sort of initiatives. I mean, how many jobs do you think have come about as a result of the money that's gone into Tilbury, and from the initiatives you spoke of?
From the community-led local development programme, there's probably not that many at the moment, because we're at the start of the programme, and the programme is about getting people to a point where they're able to access the jobs that are available. So it's not creating the jobs as such, it's getting people to a point where they're in a position to apply for those jobs and get hold of them. So one of the risks, if you like, with the programme is around how many jobs are going to be available in the local area going forward that people could apply for. Comes back to the claimant count point again. But what the programme can do is get people job ready, so when those opportunities arise, we can make sure they're in a good position to be able to apply for them. I think the other thing we can do, and it probably touches a little bit on the point that the Chair was making as well about the sort of buy locally scheme, another aspect of that could be recruit locally, and actually how can we work with the employers that we have in Tilbury, let's use Tilbury as the example, to try and encourage them to advertise particularly locally first, or give some kind of priority to local people in their application processes. So I think there's opportunities to do those things, certainly, moving forward.
Absolutely. Have you got another one to come back? Yeah, of course.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for those answers. And I find it very encouraging here, the reference to the Preston model, which is something, as someone very keen on devolution and local government as I am, it's something I'm very keen to see. A question about this is, I mean, why only sort of now? It's been going for a long time, and even as far back as 2016, the council was spending 28% of its budget on local sources, and it's rising every year because it's the model that people go to. So is this something that has always been on Thurrock's agenda, or has it come about as a result of COVID, and why now as opposed to sort of much earlier?
Thank you. So I think the answer is that it has been on the agenda for quite a while, and I think there have been initiatives and continue to be initiatives around looking at how much, for example, of our budget gets spent in the local economy, just as there continue to be initiatives around how we can advertise our own jobs locally. I think the point of putting it in the strategy was to make the point that it's important, actually, that we continue to focus on those things, and that we look at what others are doing that we could learn from, and maybe we can drive the numbers higher. Because certainly, if we're spending a high proportion of our budget in the local area, as you say, it circulates, it comes back. So it's something we should always focus on and continue to work on. But yeah, absolutely, it's something that has been a focus for quite some time. But I think it's particularly important at times like this that there's a renewed energy maybe behind that and a renewed look at what others are managing to do. And if they're managing to do it better than we are, let's learn from them.
Now you're pushing it, Councillor Karen. Go on, go ahead.
It's continuing on with the Preston theme, which because I've been really looking forward to sort of asking about this. If it's been sort of in the pipeline for sort of a while, or you've been thinking about it a long time, what particular local businesses or institutions are already in mind to be the people who we do business with this model? Because Preston is built upon sort of, community gateway housing, the University of Central Lancashire, Newman College, all these local places. So which specific areas within Thurrock, either public institutions or private institutions, are going to be the ones that we're going to source and get the money circulating throughout Thurrock?
Thank you. So I think the response to that is that to some degree, those organisations and institutions have got to select themselves, because we need them to want to come to the table. Now, that we've clearly got to have the discussions with them, explain what we're trying to do, and explain what the benefits to them might be. But certainly, I think that part of the equation has to be that they have an enthusiasm to get involved. I think one of the reasons we talk about anchor organisations in the paper is because we're thinking about those businesses and institutions that have a vested interest in Thurrock, that are here for the long term, that want to see and need to see the place succeed for their own reasons, as well as a sort of altruistic attitude. So I know we have had discussions, for example, with Forth Ports about their interest, because they're clearly a key player in the local economy, and they're here to stay. They've got an interest in seeing Thurrock succeed, because if Thurrock succeeds, they succeed. So that's example of one business. I think that the other ports might be other examples of businesses. In terms of institutions, I think clearly we've got to have discussions with health partners and the NHS. The NHS employs so many people, spends so much money. We've got to be looking at the NHS and how we can work with them. I also think probably there's something about working with some of the smaller organisations who might not in themselves spend lots of money here, but nevertheless work together with lots of other networks. So I'm thinking of things like the small business networks and so on, where collectively they have a big impact on the economy. And again, quite often will actually be living in Thurrock, and because that's why the business is here. So actually, again, they have a vested interest in seeing us succeed. So those kinds of organisations, what I'd hope we'd be able to do when we come back to you with a final report and the implementation plan is take you through a list of half a dozen or a dozen organisations who have signed up. We're aiming to do it we're aiming to have it done by January.
Well, thank you for your questions, Councillor Karen, and thank you for those detailed answers, Stephen. If I can cross the floor now to Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Stephen, for introducing this report. Corringham Town Centre is situated in my ward, and it provides valuable service to the community. I know there are a lot of other high streets and town centres across the borough that do so. I suppose I'm looking for assurance that going forward, a particular time will be given to listening to those voices in the community, small businesses in town centres, etc., and listening to their concerns, and then how we can best support them.
Absolutely. I think I can give you that assurance that we absolutely want to have conversations with the businesses in our town centres. I think that the high streets have been particularly impacted by COVID, and we all know that there were stresses and strains on the high street before the pandemic. They're a key audience that we've got to talk to and hear from. and understand what we can do to support the change that's happening in the high streets at the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, very good question, Councillor Anderson. Would you like to pose another question?
Yeah, thank you for that. The only other thing I wanted to say is more a comment, and it's a really obvious one, but I think it's worth stating, and that is obviously with community engagement. You mentioned that because of the situation as is, virtual options will have to be looked at, etc. And obviously, a lot of Thurrock residents aren't online, don't have computers. So I just think that a bit of creativity in that department wouldn't go amiss.
Yeah, absolutely. Take the point.
Thank you. Would you like to pose any further questions? Councillor Potter, would you like to pose any questions?
Well, not exactly, no. I did have a couple of questions, but they've been asked by previous councillors, and I thought the response was absolutely top-notch. Thank you.
A very, very good detailed answer, Stephen. Very clear, very concise, very, very well executed. Councillor Van Day.
That one. So this one off, yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Do you want to start again, or? Sorry. Well, I was just welcoming the report, and I thought it was quite in depth for a first report, considering it's as you said, the first part. So thank you for that, officers. And it's very enthusiastic about the borough, and of course, I think everybody here wants this to be the best borough in the country, don't we? So, dealing with my locals in my ward, there'll be a lot of questions about basic questions. Before we get Disneyland here, we need infrastructure. We need those medical centres sorted out. We need to be able to get appointments. I mean, I know the COVID thing has broken into appointments now and it's all over the place, but things are difficult. For me in Averley, I have an HGV problem coming through the town, or the village, should we say. But I do welcome it, and as a whole, I'm too consider the skills that are going to be needed in this sort of new world we're in. As some of the councillors have mentioned already, these skills have gone to the gutter, really. They're not going to make a comeback. And it's how we get and how we communicate and engage with the community to get them to open up their minds at sometimes in middle-aged, but with 40 years ahead of them, or a 20, 30-year working life ahead. What are they going to do? And how are we going to encourage them to move on to pastures new? I mean, can we work with the colleges? Can this council work with the colleges? Can we suggest and find these skills? And maybe even come up with some end jobs at the end of it? Because, of course, you hear throughout the country, well, they offer these schemes and courses, but there's no work at the end of it. So that's very important too. So I'd like to know how we can address that.
Certainly, thank you. I think skills is a really interesting area actually to think about and focus on, because it's one that we or the local authority doesn't have control over. Most of the funding for skills is coming from government to the providers and comes with obviously the restrictions in place around it. We already work with the college. We've got the council obviously has an adult community college as well. There are other providers in the area, and we're all used to working together. And I think what the strategy is really trying to do is help to galvanise that work that already happens, and to acknowledge it, but also to see what else we can do to support each other to try and help make the points that you've made to residents about the skills that are going to be needed in the future and what kind of things people need to be able to do. Make the link between that and work, and the link between that and what you learn at work, which I think is really important. And we also need to work together, and this is maybe somewhere where we really can have an impact, is about trying to broker, if you like, the link between the skills and the employers, so we can try and make sure there's much more of a join up, or at least people can see where the join up is and understand what the progression routes might be. I think skills is absolutely an area where the only way forward is to collaborate really closely with the providers and with employers to try and address it. It's not an easy win. Because for a whole host of reasons, it's not an easy win, but it's absolutely something that I think is valuable to focus on through the course of this strategy, because it will make such a difference to people's lives.
Would you like to come back? Put your mic on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Really, it's, as you say, it's anchoring them all together. The joined up thinking, joining the dots up in the borough, from the people who employ people, entrepreneurs, to people who need the work. And that's my right, how we do that in a changing world, in a changing work environment. How much we can invest in Thurrock and promoting it. And we talk about the promotion of Thurrock in your report. And actually, there's Disneyland's not coming here, by the way. I mentioned that as an analogy earlier. But in the promotion of Thurrock, I noticed that also we have poor connectivity in some areas of the borough. Well, we certainly need to sort those things out first, don't we? We've got to be able to communicate with each other if we're going to work together. So, if there's anything you can add to that.
Certainly. So I think we can all see that broadband connectivity has become even more important in the last few months, but it was of increasing importance well before that. You're right, the report does highlight that there are certain parts of Thurrock that have difficult or poor broadband connectivity, and the impact that will have on the businesses and on individuals working in those areas. The council's already been working with local authorities across South Essex to try and improve broadband connectivity. What we need to do is dive down a bit more into the research that we've got to understand what the issues are in each area, and if they're things that we can address, and if so, look at how we can address them. So there is support available through the South Essex work with the other local authorities. There is some funding available to do some work. We need to look at using that, but also look at what might be coming up in the future in terms of bidding opportunities and so on to try and address some of these issues. I think that the broadband is going to be increasingly critical to most businesses actually moving forward. So it's that's the reason it's in there. It's something that's got to be addressed, and we need to look at it. We are doing some work. We need to look at it more, I think.
Would you like to come back?
Just one last thing then. Okay. So just remember that we are the council, and we do give permissions out to all of these organisations, these entrepreneurs. They need to work with us just as much as we need to work with them. And that's it. There's no doubt more than that.
Okay. Thank you for your questions, Councillor Van Dame. Thank you again for your answer, Stephen. I know we've got Councillor Gerrish waiting, but we've got Councillor Anderson wants to ask a quick one, and then we can go over to Councillor Gerrish.
I suppose mine's more another comment after something interesting Councillor Van Dame mentioned, and that was those who are middle-aged, but 20, 30 years left in the workforce. When talking about skills, I think it's worth not losing sight of those people. We 100%, we've got to look at ensuring our young people have the skills to have a long and productive career in the workforce. But those that maybe will end up seeing their skills less in demand after COVID. I think it's worth keeping those people in mind and ensuring that there is reskilling opportunity for them.
Absolutely, I think you're right. There's a whole number of people who are have either lost their jobs or are facing the prospect of losing their jobs, who probably thought they would never need to look for a job again in their working lives. So I think you're absolutely right. I did want to just mention there's some work which colleagues in our adult community college have been doing with others across South Essex to try and promote training opportunities. It's a piece of work that's just started, but there's a campaign that's You Train, You Gain that's out there, and it's exactly about that. It's about trying to reach those people who maybe haven't had to think so much about training and development in the past. It needs to develop, and I'm sure there'll be more aspects to it, but I completely agree with your point.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson, and thank you again, Stephen. I would just like to touch on the adult education aspect. I mean, as you brought up, Councillor Van Day, I mean, I think it's a terrific thing being able to, promote adult education and provide skill set to people, even like basic computer illiteracy, and everyone. We live in times today where everyone has to use a computer one way or another, and these basic skills can bring on other job opportunities. So I would say yes, absolutely promote adult education as well. If we can move now across to Councillor Gerrish. Councillor Gerrish.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's worth saying, first of all, that really welcome this document. The need for a plan to recover Thurrock's economy post-coronavirus was one of the things that certainly the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee flagged earlier in the year, and I think it's really pleasing, therefore, to see this come forward. I think we would all support the need for really concerted action on the part of the Council and our partners to make sure that we are delivering a stronger economy here in Thurrock. I think to pick up on one of the particular questions that you set out at the beginning in terms of consultation, I think what I would certainly encourage, and I know the report makes clear that we do tend to work with a wide variety of businesses and business representatives. I think I'd certainly like to see that as wide a consultation process as we can make, whether or not that's by survey to as many of the businesses we can identify and reach within the borough as possible, or some other means. But I think we need to make sure that that covers businesses in every part of the borough and covering every kind of sector that we have here in Thurrock. And I think we really need to make sure that we understand all of those kind of key challenges that those businesses are facing and where they feel kind of the support would be best needed. And I think that kind of body of evidence would give us the kind of the ability to get really kind of detailed in terms of the planning that we are trying to do. So I guess I look to officers first of all just to sort of confirm that we are looking to be as kind of broad as that in terms of our approach.
Yeah, absolutely. We need to be consulting as widely as possible. But I think there's another point there, which is about the collection of the data and what we can do with that data on a sort of ongoing basis. One of the things I'd be quite interested in looking at is whether we can either hook on the back of another survey that might be happening in a broader area, or look to do our own on, say, a 6-monthly basis, just to understand the lay of the land and make sure that what we think are the priorities are the priorities of business out there. We certainly aim to make it as wide as possible.
Yeah, thank you. I would certainly kind of support that. And I think it's important that we recognise as well that not only is this an immediate problem for businesses, with a potential second wave and with the peeling off of government support for businesses over the kind of coming months, actually many businesses will be going into a more critical phase over coming months than they have been sort of to date. So I think it's really important that we understand that this is a moving picture rather than just a kind of a static point from here on to recovery. The second point I think I'll just cover is that I think it's important that when we get to the second phase of this document, and I certainly welcome what's here tonight, but I think when we get down to that kind of detailed planning level, what we really need to do is very kind of clearly and succinctly lay out the kind of the objectives and outcomes that we're trying to drive through the work. I think it's really important that we are clear. I think the point has been made in the meeting. We're not the government. We don't have the same levers that we can pull as the government. But I think nonetheless, if we're looking at significant investment of time, resources, potentially a lot of kind of partner working across the borough, it's really important that we spell out what those impacts are that we're hoping to drive through the work that we deliver.
Absolutely. I think through the negotiation discussions we want to have with people we're consulting, and particularly with those sort of anchor organisations we want to be working with, we need to work up shared outcomes that we're all going to sign up to and support. But I completely understand and agree with the point about having a clear aim, really clear focus for where we're going.
Thank you. And then, Chair,
would you like to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just one final point from me then. And again, I welcome the fact that this will come back to this committee for further discussion at next stage. I think it might be worth considering whether or not it would also be a suitable strategy to put to full council as well. I know this is one of those areas where it's such a major sort of point of interest for our kind of strategic interests over the next 5-10 years. But actually, I think this might well be a suitable document to have debated and kind of agreed at full council. And I'm sure that many of us would welcome the ability to input and have the kind of level of democratic oversight that brings. And thank you, Chair. That was all my points.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrish. I'll drive it home to very important local jobs for local people, booming economy. I think that's what we need to strive for. We need to get local people into them local jobs, and everyone benefits. Thank you. Is there any more questions from the floor for Stephen? Or are we exhausted this one? No more questions? Okay, thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much. If we can move on then. Sorry, yes. Is everyone happy with the recommendations? Agreed? Thank you. Right, we will move on. The Thurrock local plan, the next steps, which are on pages 33 to 40. I'm handing over to Lee Nicholson. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So this report provides an update on the progress of our local plan. The first part of the report looks back over the past few months and provides a commentary on the impact of COVID-19 on plan preparation. Although the effects of lockdown has led to some delay, work has continued on commissioning and completion of necessary technical work, with only limited delays being experienced in getting the work completed. Our attention is currently focused on the logistics of future community engagement and the rollout of further design charrettes across the borough. We're currently in conversation with the Prince's Foundation and the Council's comms teams to work out the best and safest way to continue engagement with our residents, landowners and businesses. Key to the success of any local plan is a sound evidence base and joint working. The report sets out where we are with regards to working with key stakeholders and agencies and highlights our approach to using planning performance agreements. Members will be aware that last month the government published a white paper which sets out its proposals for the reform of the planning system. We're currently working our way through the proposed changes, and a verbal update will be provided at the next meeting. But I'm pleased to say that in many ways the approach that we've already adopted is aligned to the approach now being promoted by government. Our approach to growth has always been that it should be community-driven, infrastructure-led, and make a key contribution to high-quality placemaking. And these cornerstones are reflected in the white paper. In particular, our work with the Prince's Foundation in rolling out design charrettes is strongly supported by the reforms. The concept of working with our communities, landowners and developers to create locally distinctive master plans for development on a town-by-town basis forms a core plank of the government's design coding ambitions. We're very much ahead of the curve in this respect. In terms of the next steps, we're looking to roll out the design charrette events in association with the Prince's Foundation across the borough. setting up development teams which include landowners, scheme promoters, the council and other key delivery partners such as Homes England, Highways England, etc. The further evolution and development of Your Place, Your Voice community engagement events, and we've just been speaking about that, about how difficult it could be to have those events and to engage with communities, but we are looking for those for solutions to those and looking to reach out to our communities. And finally, development of a transport strategy which will serve as an evidence base for large-scale strategic infrastructure which will underpin growth within the borough. We're due to bring a report to the next meeting on that transport strategy. So I guess that's just a quick whistle-stop tour as to where we are with the progress of the plan at the moment. But I guess in conclusion, we're confident that we're on the right track, and having local plan and EDS or economic development strategy aligned will help to create those right conditions for prosperity in the borough. Chair, I hope this update's been of assistance. We'll continue to have conversations about the progress of the local plan over the course of the forthcoming meetings, but happy to field any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. If I can start off with local plan and the growth and the proposal of the further 32,000 homes over the next 2 decades. This is obviously going to increase our population here in Thurrock. I do believe we stand on about 165,000 presently, and this could ideally, a further 32,000 homes could increase our population by probably 90 to 100,000, which would take our population over 250,000 then. And we're talking about we're the third largest authority in the country without its own working accident and emergency hospital. It's great to look at, growth within the area. I think, most of the councillors have touched on infrastructure and how that needs to be changed to adapt for this growth. And it's huge growth we're talking about. Transport links, again, that's been touched on a number of times. We could be certainly using that river more for transport links. But most importantly, I think that we shouldn't push aside is health and well-being, because without health and well-being, what have we got exactly? Nothing. So we need to be looking at doctor surgeries. We need to be looking at health hubs, and I think most importantly, we need to be looking. If we're going to expand that much, we need to be looking at our own hospital. I'll open up the floor to any questions. Who would like to go first? Councillor Kerrin again.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this report. I'm really interested in the timeline on page 36, and in particular, it seems it's next year, but it's not too far away now. In terms, if you think of how quickly this year has gone by, completing the settlement reports, and I've been saying for a long time that I want to see the principles that are underpinning the 32,000 homes, because that's the figure that's out there that everyone, you ask the ordinary person in the street, they can say 32,000 homes. But I'm still not really any clearer about the principles behind what kind of homes there'll be. 2-bedroom flats, 4-bedroom detached, I don't know. Village expansions, whole-scale new settlement. I think we're reaching the absolute limit of urban intensification. So beyond the number 32,000 homes, when are we going to see the principles behind who we think will be filling those homes in terms of demographics? Is it young families, or is it a particular type of worker because certain businesses are here, flats, houses, whatever? What's the principles behind it, so we can move away from just 32,000 homes to 32,000 types of homes, and why they're there in the first place?
Thank you, Chair. And we've had these conversations in the past, but it's really around a local plan has to be underpinned by evidence, a sound evidence base for a plan to be in a position to be adopted. And there's a suite of supporting studies which underpin any local plan. Housing assessments, economic needs assessments will be the two probably most relevant to what the question you just asked. But the starting point, working bottom up with the community about, as the chair just mentioned, what are the non-negotiables for development in a particular part of the borough, that's local issues that simply can't continue as they are. They need to be resolved to allow growth to proceed, and for it to be, it's more about placemaking more than numbers. And but inevitably people will latch onto just the headline figures and numbers. But going through the design charrette process, working with communities, landowners, developers, yourselves members through the committees as well, is building up the visions for those places, so it isn't one size fits all, so it isn't just simply planning by numbers, but it is actually building up genuine unique places that actually keeps the core characteristics of some of the places rather than building anywhere towns. That's that's an unashamed ambition to do that. But it has to be driven by evidence as well. So as we roll on with the progression of the evidence base, and as we come back to have these conversations, we will be able to put more detail in terms of what is our housing assessment saying, what is our economic needs assessment saying, what's the opportunities here, and how we can make them right decisions for those right places.
If I could just interject there before we hand over to you again, Councillor Kerrin. I think it's clear to say that the local plan that's proposed over the next 2 decades is going to be mainly of private developers creating homes. What I think we're shying away from nowadays is we're not getting any council housing as such, which it's been deemed now as affordable housing, which is, I understand, charged at 80% of the market rate. Why can we not produce homes, council homes, which are affordable? We are, like you suggested, a landowner, so I do believe we have got the land available. Can we not be looking at, producing council houses again, and perhaps shy away from this affordable housing, which is only affordable if you can afford it? And now what we're finding is that we need a working couple now to be able to earn enough to pay the bills nowadays, Whereas before, it might be olden day where the fella went out to forage and the wife looked after the house and the children. It's a little bit different to that now, because it's, the way of living, the way of life is more expensive now. But shouldn't we as an authority be looking at providing proper council housing and reduce that 8,000, I do believe, 8,000 people on the waiting list? And Councillor Kerrin, if you'd like to come back.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I welcome the evidence. I believe you're going to be working on the evidence. So are we waiting till April 2021 to see what type of housing we're expecting? And following on from the Chair's points, will the 8,000 housing waiting list feed into that evidence process? And in addition to council housing, we should also be looking at housing association housing as well. And we should be able to say, out of the 32,000 homes, this is what we're looking at for council. This, because our list says this. We're looking for this much housing association because the evidence base suggests that we have a need for X amount of housing association houses. So to bring all that together, are we waiting till April to May 2021 to finally have the evidence in front of us to tell us what kind of housing we need to drive us forward for the next 2 decades?
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely agree with the comments that both yourself and the Chair has just made. The local plan will have to provide a wide range of housing options for our residents. So it won't just be that one size fits all comment. The concept of working in individual locations and working with that evidence is because, again, in one part of the borough, the needs will be very different to another part of the borough, and it is looking at what the urgent needs are in terms of how council waiting lists or what the demographic is in that area, and how you respond to that, but also then take it to a better place as well, and always looking to take it up. Absolutely, the council housing will have to form part of that, but there'll be multiple outlets to deliver these places, and the numbers. Council is already working with partner organisations, including Homes England, to look at different funding options and how we might be able to bring this forward as quickly as possible. Your question of do we have to wait until April 2021? No, I think as we roll on with these meetings, we have another meeting next month where we'll continue to talk about this, and we'll just continue that conversation about the evidence. So I wouldn't want to say you have to wait until this point for us to start talking about it. It will be an evolution of a conversation. So.
Thank you, Lee. And any more?
I just think that evidence thing will be the thing that drives us forward in looking at the type of housing, and that's where we'd be able to ask serious questions. But once the evidence is laid out, that we can start challenging about the number of council homes, housing association homes, and genuinely affordable. May I suggest, Chair, I think that we should be looking at Thurrock affordable, our own measure for affordable housing. Let's have it benchmarked as Thurrock affordable.
Thank you. Thank you. If I can just go across to Andy, and then I'll come back to Councillor Potter. Everyone wants to have a go, so just bear with me, guys. And Andy, if you could, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to sort of reinforce some of the messages coming through from Lee, because I think they're vitally important. It's so easy. For obvious reasons, we've got a national housing crisis, and that's as acute here in Thurrock as it is anywhere else. But we are an incredibly diverse borough, with a number of very different settlements with a lot of different and varying needs. And I think that's the critical thing about the approach we're looking to adopt through the design charrettes. And the benefit of taking a bottom-up approach rather than looking at a headline figure and working out how you're going to achieve it. It's actually going into each of those geographic locations and understanding exactly what a great Averley might look like going forward, or a great Ockenden, etc., across our borough, working with communities, working out where through that evidence-based work that Councillor Kerry was asking questions about earlier, about where there's existing deficits and problems, understanding the totality of infrastructure. Yes, it's affordable housing, and absolutely, and yes, it's transportation infrastructure, the two things we tend to look at in particular, but it's also about education, it's about health, it's about open spaces, and it's also about how we link our various communities in the borough, because we are quite dispersed in the way that the borough finds itself geographically at present. So the discussion and debate around evidence and around the design charrettes and around engaging with local communities, I think, is absolutely critical if we're going to get high quality placemaking out the other side of this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. If I can just touch on, I'm sure you'd agree that we should be looking at reducing that 8,000 people on the waiting list, considerably. And if I could ask you a direct question, Andy, out of the 32,000 proposed homes over the next 2 decades, in terms of percentage, what percentage are we looking at for affordability? So affordable homes for families on low incomes to rent?
Chair, at present, the council's policy is 35%. The work that Lee and his team are doing to bring forward the local plan will review that figure. My view is that is unlikely to change significantly. So ballpark, it will still be around that figure. And of course, that affordability requirement can be provided through a variety of methods and sources, through the direct provision of council homes, through affordable rented accommodation, shared ownership, and a number of other potential models. But broadly in that basket of affordability, or affordable homes, should I say, yeah, you're talking around 35% of the headline figure.
Lovely, thank you, Andy. And can I go across to Councillor Potter now, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can you possibly tell us what percentage of the 32,000 houses to be constructed are going to be built on our green belt? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Very difficult to answer until we have gone through that process of the design charrettes and looking at what growth options are out there with the communities and what appetite there is for that type of development. So I think when we get towards this time next year, we'll probably be in a better position to look at that. We will be commissioning a second Greenbelt review, which will be around about summertime next year, which will then probably start to put a bit more of a fix on that. But yeah, so that's probably the best I can really answer that at the moment until we've gone through the process. Otherwise, we're just simply prejudging that process.
Thank you, Lee, for that. And would you like to come back? Have you got a supplementary, Councillor Potter?
Not so much a question, it's just that I'm on the planning committee, and sometimes we disapprove an approval for one house because it's gobbling up the green belt, and now we're looking at thousands and thousands. It's really difficult to get your head around that amount, gobbling up our residents' green belt. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I know Councillor Anderson's had his hand up for a little while, but I'd like to go across first to Councillor Gerrish, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I agree, I think, with a lot of what's been said in the committee already. I mean, I think several kind of councillors have put it quite well when we talk about the concerns that we have to make sure that the way this development is delivered and not just the volumes, it's very important to get that right for Thurrock. Yeah, I think sort of importantly as well, I'd sort of take the 2 points that you made at the start of the meeting, or at the start of the item, around health and council housing. I would particularly agree that it feels like there's an opportunity to do more than we are currently proposing. And Chair, I wonder if you'd be amenable to actually passing that in terms of a recommendation this evening. I certainly see no reason that we couldn't, as a committee, recommend firstly that the planning process, as it's taken forward, includes planning for a new accident and emergency equipped local hospital. I think that would be a very important statement of will from this committee. And I also think that, we've got the evidence that we need the council houses. We know we're just shy of 10,000 on the waiting list. The evidence is there that's needed. We know that 10,000 is approximately a third of the approximately a third of the total houses we're going to build. So I don't think it's unreasonable at all to say, actually, we should be targeting around 30% of all those houses to be delivered should be council or housing association homes. It feels like a lot, but I think radical solutions are required when the waiting list is of the scale it is. So, Chair, if you were happy to sort of put those as recommendations this evening, I certainly would be very happy to support those. And I think it'd be a really important statement from this committee in terms of how we should be taking this process forward.
Councillor Gerrish, I'm more than happy to do that, because I'm 100% in agreement that the health and well-being of this borough is critical, because without it we've got nothing. So health is paramount, and yes, absolutely, I will. If we could, Kenna, put that forward, recommendations that is provided. If we're going to deliver this amount of housing, and we're going to boost the Thurrock population by probably as many as another 100,000 people, taking us over 250,000 people. We seriously need to be looking at healthcare, our own working accident and emergency hospital, and I should imagine we will have to do that through our current MPs. Our current MPs should be lobbying to get that provided for the future health of this borough.
Chair, if it helps, I can suggest a format of words for those two recommendations.
Go ahead.
Chair, what I suggest is if we recommend a 1.2, that Planning, Transport and Regeneration Committee calls on Cabinet to include planning for a new accident and emergency equipped local hospital in the local plan process, and a 1.3, that Planning, Transport and Regeneration Committee calls on Cabinet to target 30% of all houses delivered to be council or housing association homes. And Chair, hopefully that kind of captured the spirit of what you started the item with.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Councillor Gerrish. But I think Lee or Andy touched on 35% that they were looking, and you just proposed 30. So can we change that to 35%?
Yeah, Chair, I think that's a sensible recommendation.
Chair, if I could just clarify my advice, it was that's the current figure. The evidence that Lee and team are working on may well show that as 40, it might show it as 25. I don't know at this moment in time as we work through that figure. So I did emphasise it was a ballpark figure, just to emphasise that.
Thank you, Andy. But I think we do need to be thriving for that. If we can get more, then all well and good. But I think we should be looking at that 35%, and yeah, I'm all for that. Our members in agreement?
Can I talk, Chair? Yeah. Of course, we want people to have homes. If I was canvassing when I was going up for council, and I was with quite a good well-known government minister. We knocked on a door in my ward, in the council estate, and said, "Hello, we're so-and-so and so-and-so. Isn't it wonderful? We're proposing to build 5,000 new council houses." Just slammed the door in the face. And I've got that from a lot of the residents. Until we get this infrastructure in place, which should come first, to carry a motion like this right now, I'm not sure, I'm not going to say I'm against it, right? But I might abstain tonight if it was asked to. And just moving on, back to Lee, which with Averley being the guinea pig for some of his report, I'd like to ask him how the progress is going in Averley, and also that I have attended some of the meetings for the proposals. I haven't seen anything come through. They're usually in church halls, and I'm not against anybody's faith or anything, but it'd be nice if they could expand. We've got a fabulous football stadium there. Why can't we have some meetings there? Because I think that would be really reaching out to other parts of the community who, for whatever reason, might feel guilty of not going to church, only going there for meetings. I don't know. But I think it would help.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that suggestion. I should imagine that it would be, you could say, a more neutral place to meet. And, football, there's a huge football following in Thurrock. It's a shame that we couldn't actually give somewhere to house Grays Athletic as well, because they do great work in the borough, and I'd love to see them get their own pitch and their own place. I've got plenty of hands up. If you could make it quick, Councillor Van Day, and then.
Yes, I could. It's just that our Boy Scouts in Averley haven't got a hut. They have in all the other wards in Thurrock. We haven't even got a hut, and we're proposing all these other magical things. So we need to get the basics right. That's what I'm saying.
It would be great to think that we could deliver on such infrastructure, and especially this hospital. I would say put the hospital in first before you build the area, and then the healthcare is there and it's ready, it's up and running, it's geared to take them numbers on. If I could go to Councillor Anderson and then I'll come to Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to start off by agreeing with Councillor Van Dale. I think it may well be, a bit premature in the process at the moment to be calling on for a new hospital and particular amounts of council housing, etc. We're going through the process at the moment, and so I'm wondering: are these recommendations sort of calling for this to happen, or are we calling for officers to explore these possibilities? So that's one thing. And then the question I had for Lee was regarding the white paper. As you said, you've looked through it, and you said that a lot of it Thurrock is in line with at the moment anyway. Is there anything in that white paper that is at odds with the way Thurrock currently is looking to develop in the future?
Thanks, Lee.
No, not necessarily. I think the devil's always in the detail, but obviously looking for the positivity and looking for the optimist. The optimist in me is looking for those where we are aligned. But I am genuinely pleased to say that in a lot of what's in the planning with white paper reforms are very closely aligned with the work that we have already been doing. So the direction that the council has already been going and its approach to engaging communities is very much, as I say, a core plank of the governance reforms, which is, really pleasing to see, puts us in good stead. We'll continue to have conversations with MHCLG, Plan Inspector and others to make sure that we continue on that path so that we're not wasting time or money on anything that wouldn't survive a changing planning system, to make sure we stay on that right track.
Okay, Lee, I understand that before we've approached health providers, and asked them. I think we asked them the question: would I think it's the South Stifford development, which was the latter part of the Chafford 100 down Devonshire Road. I think we approached the health providers and asked them if there was enough healthcare to put that development there where it currently is, and I think it was answered that there wasn't adequate healthcare if that amount of dwellings was put in that actual area. Could you elaborate on that? Could you give us a little bit of info into that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If we're referring to the more recent application that's on the corner of Devonshire Road as you go on towards London Road, yeah, if that's the one, okay. There was a Section 106 secured for improvements in healthcare, and I think that if I remember rightly, the provision was made back within the Grays locality. So there was a Section 106 agreement attached to that. It wasn't on the first hearing of the application, but it came in as a later stage in the life of that application. But there was one secured. It wasn't a great deal of money from recollection, but there was something secured.
Have we had the conversations with the health providers regarding the local plan and the 32,000 homes? I mean, the interjection of that many homes, and I mean, are we able to provide adequate healthcare for another 100,000 people?
Yeah, I mean that's the ongoing conversations which we're having with all service providers, not just health providers. But I mentioned about the transport strategy, which we'll be bringing to the next committee, where we'll be talking to transport providers in the borough and seeing what impact the local plan, the growth targets in the local plan will have on them, on what needs to be improved, and how we move to more sustainable transport modes. And in much the same way, how do we support that level of growth and the placemaking agenda through the healthcare agenda as well. So absolutely agree with what you're saying, and it's conversations which we are having.
Would you agree, Lee, that implementation of such things, transport links, healthcare, should be implemented prior to the growth, instead of seeing the growth first and then implementing the services which might shortfall?
Absolutely. In the opening statement I just made about the report, referred to infrastructure first, community driven, high quality, and those are the three pillars that are underpinning our plan. What we need to do is have those conversations around infrastructure. They're going to be hard conversations, but they're conversations to be had about how we bring that infrastructure into place to support that development. It can't be promises of jam tomorrow.
Absolutely. And if I could go over to Andy again, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Karen.
Lee's largely covered the point I wanted to make, Chair, but it's the point that we've used on this plan as actually we shouldn't really call this the local plan, we should call it the Thurrock plan, because actually it is a truly, or should be, and will be, a truly integrated document which looks at all aspects of what makes up a great place, from housing to open space to education to health, etc., etc., etc. Picking up on Councillor Anderson's point, yeah, we can certainly investigate any of these particular issues that have been raised with the various service providers, whether they be health or whoever. But ultimately, it's a question of dialogue and seeing how those service providers see the needs for their particular sector, if the borough grows by whatever shape. The other thing to flag is out of the white paper and the conversation that has often been had around the British planning system about the fact that you don't get the infrastructure up front. It comes as a bit of an afterthought and a bit late in the process. What's an interesting and another one of the positive bits of the white paper is it's alluded to the fact that there would be, in effect, the ability for local authorities to draw down on central funding to provide the infrastructure up front when the development comes, for the developers to then pay that back. A little bit like some of European planning systems already are. So I think that's another one of the more positive aspects that are coming through the white paper that would help to get communities to see growth as something to embrace and welcome if delivered appropriately, rather than the way that they view it with fear, as Councillor Van Dijk illustrated earlier, because. I'm sure it's the same for you as elected members. When we speak to communities, people aren't necessarily against the concept of growth. It's just that their previous experience about how it's happened has not led them to feel that comfortable about it, and they're using that as the benchmark for the future. So it's difficult to change those perceptions around, but it's why we've got to work collectively doubly hard, I think, to take that sort of bottom-up, community-driven approach to helping to deliver growth, as opposed to some of the more negative examples that people have seen historically.
Thank you, Andy. I think we need to also ensure that the 106 monies that you touched on are being spent appropriately on such needed services and infrastructure, so on. We need to be investing every single penny that we can get in Thurrock to make it, a great place to live, work, rest and play. I'm sure you'd agree. If I can go over to Councillor Kerry.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to say I totally support Councillor Gerrish's recommendation on council housing. I'm a big supporter of council housing and housing association housing. I grew up in council housing and housing association housing. I wouldn't have had anywhere to live if we didn't have it. And I think we talk about being bold and ambitious. Let's be bold and ambitious for those who are on the waiting list. We have a moral obligation to do something about this. And I've really enjoyed listening to all the different councillors in here. And it's something you said really sort of hit a sort of raw nerve with me a bit there, Councillor Van Dijk. I totally believe your anecdote about the canvassing and the reaction you got from the resident when you mentioned council housing. But all I'd say is the person who slammed the door in your face had a home, and they had a door to shut in your face. And I actually think that if we're ambitious and put this out there, we can send a statement of intent that Thurrock is serious about addressing its housing shortage with high quality, affordable council and housing association homes. And I think this is a really positive way forward.
Yeah, Councillor Kerrin, I totally with you on that, and I do believe that we can provide that accommodation to people if we try. Councillor Van Day, you'd like to come back?
Just a quick one. It's just answer back to you. I mean, of course, probably the person that slammed their face on the door of my face probably did, as you write, they had their home, but they probably had middle-aged children there living there who they want to find a home for, and what they want to do is find homes for local people. So, I mean, it's when it's in their back garden they don't want it. Sometimes, and we have to consider that as well. So, but of course, yeah, of course we need more homes. How are we going to grow? How are we going to become this great borough without that? That's all I'd like to say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Van Day. Can I go over to Councillor Potter, please? You've been waiting patiently.
Thank you, Chair. With regards to tonight's recommendation, would it be possible to split it into two recommendations? Because I feel I could vote for one part of it and not the other, and the whole recommendation is too broad. Could we have one recommendation maybe for the A&E facilitated hospital and one recommendation for the percentage of affordables? Is that possible?
I can't see why not, really. As Councillor Kerrin and Councillor Gerrish, have you got any problems with that?
Thank you, Chair. It was just for some clarity. I think obviously when Councillor Gerrish put forward the recommendations, he put them forward as two separate. So in addition to recommendation 1.1, there's also an additional two recommendations. So obviously with regards to the council housing and the A&E facility. Thank you.
So just to confirm, Ken, that's two anyway. It's two separate. Councillor Van Dyke.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just I think we need to digest this just a bit more, than having this put on us tonight. I would, even if I agree to certainly vote at our next meeting, could we just postpone it to then so I can just a bit more research on it?
Can I?
Sorry, Jed. I think members are all kind of in the same place. I think it's, as Councillor Anderson said, it's perhaps with the wording of it. Maybe it'd be useful to say, if officers could take it back and investigate it and bring it back in the next report. And then from that, when you've got more information, you can then refer that on to Cabinet. That might be a solution, something to think about.
Andy, have you got any interjection on
Yeah,
this?
Chair, just trying to help members to this place. I think I go back to what Councillor Anderson said, and that is, this committee's views as expressed are clear on both of these fronts. But I think, in my mind, what I'm hearing is that you're asking officers, bearing in mind the position we're at with the local plan at the moment, and the fact that we need to work through the evidence base in the way that Lee described and work with communities. As I understood the recommendations, additional recommendations from Councillor Gerrish, there were things that needed to be investigated and progressed with service providers, notably the health authorities, as we progress the local plan. Quite clearly, we can't say here this evening, we must have a new hospital. We must have the debate about that, and we must speak to the health providers and see the feasibility and see how it fits in healthcare models. Absolutely, and that's very much part of the process. But there's a subtle difference between investigating and working with the necessary service providers to that desired end, against a more stark recommendation around the local plan must contain a hospital, must contain whatever else. So the subtlety, as committee clerk is suggesting, is in the wording here.
I agree partly with you, Andy, but I still believe that we should be geared up now for this local plan. If we are seeing as many as, let's just look, we're plucking numbers out of the air at the moment. It could be 90,000, it could be 100,000, it could be more. But not having adequate healthcare in place is disastrous, I think. shouldn't we be planning in advance for this? Ensuring people's healthcare, which is absolutely paramount. And again, I can't stress enough that without health and well-being, Councillor Van Dijk, what have we got? What have we got? Very little to hold on to. So I think it's a very important thing, Andy, that we look at this, in depth. Yes, we need to speak to health providers, but we need to be doing that right away. We need to be gearing up for this, because this is certainly going to happen. It's like let's just use the Lower Thames crossing, the dreaded Lower Thames crossing, which is going to probably make even more people unhealthy. That's coming. There's no doubt about it. I done a delivery job today at Princess Margaret Road on the old Barter estate. I've never seen so many LTS vehicles, Highways England, in one place. So it's certainly happening. It's happening. So we need to look. It's a serious thing. Healthcare.
Chair, if I could, in response to that, absolutely, that's understood. And healthcare and education provision and everything else is vital to a great borough going forward. What I'm questioning is whether or not it's the imposition of a solution and then you work back, or whether you work with the healthcare provider to look at actually what the healthcare model needs to be. We need to know exactly how many homes are going to be provided, where they're going to be provided, what the mix will be, etc. And we need to absolutely be working with healthcare providers to see what the commensurate healthcare package and solution is. Might that be one A&E hospital? Might that be two? Might it be a series of integrated medical centres? It could be a range of things. So I think what I'm suggesting is that the necessity for dialogue with the service providers, healthcare service providers, is absolutely paramount. But we should work with them to find, with their expertise and then their knowledge as to what needs to be provided, what the optimum solution is for a great healthcare system in the borough. That, I think, is paramount, and then see what the solution comes out the other end of that process. Chair, you may have spotted, I just saw a corner of my eye, Councillor Gerrish has his hand up.
Yeah, can we go over to Councillor Gerrish, please?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I don't think I disagree with much of what Andy said there. I think it's clearly, there are clearly processes that you have to go through with this. And I think it's worth bearing in mind that, the PTR committee here is here to oversee and scrutinise. We're not a decision-making body on this. And I think it comes down to, are we asking questions tonight, or are we making statements in terms of the direction that we'd like to see things? And my instinct, Chair, is that I agree with you in terms of the kind of comment that I want to make on the direction that the local plan process needs to go in. I think those are two very important issues. I would certainly like to see us make a statement on them and to say that we need to do those as part of the process. Now, if that's not possible and if that gets knocked back further in the process, well, it's for someone else that takes up that process to knock back those elements. But I think it is, to me anyway, important that we make the statement and kind of do our bit to sort of state that they are an important element of what we'd like to see progressing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrish. Much fault. The cogs are turning. In terms, Andy, if I can ask you, in terms of bringing this back, and also Democratic Services, Kenna, bringing this back to our next meeting, is there scope to bring this back if you was to go away, Andy and Lee and the officers and speak to, have some dialogue with these health providers and, and literally ask them, does Thurrock support its own working accident and emergency hospital for the future population explosion? Because that's what we're going to have. We have started building these houses, it's not 32,000. Perhaps Lee could tell me, I think we're on about, I think we need to produce another 26. We've already produced quite a few already, haven't we, Lee?
Chair, so over the plan period, and there's another complication to this, which I was hesitating to bring into this, but it is dependent upon the planning reforms as well, depending on what the plan, the time period for the local plan. So we're talking about 32,000 new homes over the plan period to what we are working to at the moment. But if the planning reforms come in, they may look at shorter time periods, which would put a different spin on things. So just to echo what Andy was saying around just an element of caution around putting an assurances for certain things to go in as it stands tonight, then in a couple of months' time, if the planning reforms change the landscape in the country, then we may be looking at a slightly different plan, which may mean we look at slightly different healthcare models because we're looking at a slightly different time frame and different numbers. So there's still quite a lot to work with there. So.
Yeah, can I just come back on that? Are you saying that, I mean, it's one of my proposed work programmes anyway, it's my third proposed work programme of the new planning laws, a report of the new planning laws, and again, how this would impact Thurrock. Are you saying, Lee, that it could complicate planning matters, or are you saying that we could produce housing quicker under the new planning laws?
It's difficult to say at the moment. What we will do is bring, as I said, we'll bring a verbal update back to the next meeting where we will talk about the implications of the planning reforms. As a council, we will respond to that consultation. The government would need to take that into account along with other consultation responses, and they would obviously have to legislate before any changes came into the system. But what I was just saying is there's just an element of caution around a statement. As Andy said, is it one hospital? Is it two hospitals? Is there a different range of options? And I think it is just a continuing dialogue with healthcare providers and the community with to look at where development actually goes in the borough, the spatial options. And that will evolve, and I think we're all quite adamant here, I think officers and members, is that infrastructure must go in front of any new development, and it's just how we get to that place through that dialogue.
Thank you, Lee. Kenna?
Thank you, Chair. Just going off of your query, we obviously had the local plan update on for the December meeting. If members were mindful, we could obviously make sure that it's minuted, and obviously that gives officers the chance to go have the conversations needed and report back and be included within that update. And then at that point, obviously we'll have the verbal update from the October meeting with regards to the white paper. We'll have a bit more information, which will hopefully give members and the committee the chance to make, the decisions, the recommendations that they'd like to make.
Yeah, I agree, Ken. So it makes sense, I guess, yeah. Councillor Karen.
Thank you for that, Chair. I personally think Councillor Gerrish has proposed 2 new recommendations. I think they should be put to the committee, and members have the right to either vote for, against, or abstain, just like with any recommendation. And I think that's what we should do. And I would like to sort of hear, this Councillor Gerrish just confirm the recommendation that he's put in, and then I say we've got the democratic option of if we don't like it, we can vote against. If we like the recommendation, we vote for, or you can abstain. We have 3 choices in most things in this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Karen. Can I go across to Councillor Anderson, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think the issue here is about semantics. Are we, for want of a better word, demanding that a hospital is included in the local plan? I mean, at this point, particularly seeing the evidence base, and I just think that these issues should form part of the process. I'd like to see the evidence base. I don't think this is something that we should be saying here right now tonight, the local plan should contain this and it should contain that. If the recommendations are that officers go away and they look at these, that they should be looking at these things, I'm sure everyone in this room supports them looking at options, but demanding that this be in there tonight and this be in there tonight, that's not something that I can support.
Right, okay, thank you. We often speak about community-led local developments. The community, you're going out there and you're asking the community what they want, their wish list. And I'm sure if we were to put to the people of Thurrock its own hospital and better healthcare, I'm sure that the majority of the population of Thurrock would opt for that healthcare. Is there any way that we can do that? Perhaps Stephen, you might like to touch on this. You've been involved in community-led local developments. Could we not put that, put the question out there? It's all well and good us officers and us councillors sitting here saying what we want and what we don't want. Shouldn't we be asking the people, our residents, what they actually want?
So the community-led local development scheme we have in Tilbury is obviously a specific name for a particular programme. But we talked earlier on about the in the refreshed sort of economic development strategy, working collaboratively with communities and with our anchor organisations to develop a shared approach. I think it would be fair to say that's the approach that Lee is suggesting through the design charrettes and through the process that would be followed to develop the local plan. So I think from what my understanding, that is a sort of similar process to what's being proposed in this regard. Would that be fair, Lee?
Yes.
Andy, would you like to add anything to that?
Not specifically, Chair, because I think that point has been pretty well rehearsed. But I come back to the point of semantics. Absolutely, the local plan needs to be community driven, but also it's got to be realistic. And if it's not, when it comes to examination in public, it will not cut mustard, and we'll have a failed local plan. And clearly, that's in nobody's interest. So the aspiration for excellent healthcare for every resident in our community is got to be the case. How that is provided needs to be in active dialogue with healthcare providers to ensure that aspiration is reasonably deliverable, and the two will marry, and as alongside all other aspects of the plan, because for that same debate for health, you can read the same debate for education, etc., etc. Those two things marry, because if it's not deliverable, the plan won't be sound, and you won't get what you're aspiring to achieve anyway. So absolutely, there is that need for dialogue. Absolutely, there needs to be that aspiration for absolute excellent healthcare for our residents. But then it's how we then engage with the various healthcare sectors to see exactly what that might mean in terms of delivery models on the ground. That's the point, and it comes back to that understanding of what is a reasonably deliverable model.
I don't know if I'm missing the point here, but I think what it comes down to, Andy, is funding. I mean, we can increase healthcare, but it's down to funding. As we know, healthcare costs money, and I think that more money should be spent on Thurrock's healthcare. We've got Basildon Hospital, which hasn't had a fantastic name through its failings, because I think it's fouled because it simply has to look after too many people, It's got too wide of an area and mass population to look after, and I think that's. I'm not saying it's a terrible hospital, because it's saved countless lives. It's actually saved my life, but in its failings, I think it is because it's got far too many people to look after. And if we're increasing our population by a huge amount, I'm sure we should certainly be looking at providing our own hospital sooner rather than later. And I'd love to ask, like I mentioned earlier, our two MPs, which is Jackie Doyle-Price and Stephen Metcalfe, of how they feel on delivering such a hospital for the future healthcare. I know you've touched on the health hubs, the 4 proposed health hubs that we're supposed to have coming, and I mean we've not got much progression on them. Yeah, that's understandable. With our current COVID, pandemic, it's understandable, but we don't seem to be moving in the right direction quick enough. We seem to be almost even in a non-COVID situation, we drag our feet. We really need to be looking at providing A1 healthcare. And if we've got that, and I'm sure as a borough, we will absolutely thrive. People will be healthy, hopefully, and we'll succeed as a leading borough, what we inspire to be. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Getting back to your previous comment about engagement with residents, I'm extremely passionate with that. That's what we're here for. We're not here for us. We're here for them. And I have not ever spoken to one resident that does not want a proper A&E hospital in Thurrock. End of.
Absolutely, Councillor Potter. It's common sense. If you were to say that it's not needed, I think that you'd be, I'm not sure, selling yourself out. Everyone wants to aspire to be healthy and live a long and productive life, and and again, in terms of providing for the economy to work, to earn, and make the local economy thrive, you have to be healthy to do that. So Van Dyke.
Yeah, I don't think we're disputing that. If you asked anybody would they like an A&E on the front doorstep, I'm sure they would. That's not the point really here. For the sake of what might take a couple of weeks for these officers to get the other side's opinion of this, if this is really feasible, to have this A&E hospital, and to catch up on those 4 hubs that you mentioned, Chair, where we are with that. And I sort of, heckled you with COVID and things like that, of course, but it's not just the healthcare. COVID's caused all industries. So I beseech you just to pause on this today and give us at least to the next meeting to come back and make a decision or do a vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Van Dyke. And kind of hit a wall. It's probably going to be more sensible if the officers can guarantee that they're going to go away and they're going to talk with the health providers and put through a good case, because I feel that it is needed, and you'd be wrong saying it isn't needed. And especially, I mean, if we can have a report on the health hubs as well, where we are with those. I mean, obviously, I think they're going to be okay for a while. Once they're delivered, these health hubs, they're going to serve different parts of the borough fantastically. I'm sure of it. But as the place grows, I think they're sort of going to become, I don't know, overworked, and then perhaps we'll be not looking after the health so thoroughly. When more and more people come to want to live in this borough, when these houses are delivered, we're literally, Andy, I don't know if you agree, we're going to become sort of an extension of London. We're going to become that populated. We're going to be like a mini East London borough. Yeah. They did. They come to work. Most people come from out of Plaistow, Custom House, all round there, East London. They come to work at Tilbury Docks, which has been a working docks now for over 136 years. I mean, Thurrock is ideally made up of Londoners, but I'm not talking in terms of, there's nothing wrong with London people, okay? All right, love Londoners, but in terms, I'm talking about London in terms of its density, its pollution. I touched on the Lower Thames Crossing again earlier, which I think is going to be, it's going to drive a stake through the heart of Thurrock. It's going to be a disaster. Yeah. But it's coming. So healthcare again. I suggest we take it away. I don't suggest we do it tonight. I suggest we take it away. And if you can ensure the officers, you can ensure that you are going to go away and you are going to have serious talks, and you're going to come back and you're going to provide some kind of credible way forward for this borough in terms of its health as the population explodes, Andy.
Chair, we can certainly take it away. I need to get expectations right. We cannot come back here and say this is what it's going to be, for all the reasons we've discussed this evening. This is an iterative discussion over a period of time that looks about the level of new homes and growth in the borough, where that's going to go, and as a result of that, health alongside all other services needs to be factored in. What we can do is we can take this matter away and bring a report back to a future committee. October might be a little tight because this is an extraordinary meeting plugged in, so there's not a lot of time till the next meeting. So either the next meeting, if we can, or the December meeting, and we can bring you back a report that talks about how we will be engaging with the various health sector providers and what their views are in terms of what models are to create a A1, I think you used the description, Chair, it was a good one, an A1 healthcare system in this borough going forward. What might that look like? What are the various scenarios depending upon levels of growth and where that growth is going to be? So not a definitive, but absolutely a mapping out of how we're going to engage and what the potential scenarios are. So this committee is fully sighted on those range of options.
I just hope that it's not going to be ignored, Andy, and I'll touch on it, like I was tonight by the Chief Executive and the Director of Finance, who I asked to attend tonight, and I was ignored. So I just hope that this matter is not ignored the way I've been ignored tonight by two of the senior officers of this council. I think it's clear to say that if we took a vote tonight on this, I'm sure that it'd be 3-3, so it'd be a draw. Because I'm sure we've got. I would personally, when it comes to healthcare, I'd side with Labour on this one. And I weren't going to make any political references, but I'd certainly go with Labour on this one. And so it would appear that the Conservatives would stick together. I would side with Labour, and it would be 3-3, so we'd get no result anyway. Yeah, Councillor Kerrin.
Yeah, this all sort of avoids the fact that two new recommendations have been put. I'm sorry, I'm sure he's about to say that, Ken. Apologies, I think he was about to, but that's a fact. 2 recommendations being put. So we need to hear them and then vote accordingly, I believe. But I'll defer to both yourself as chair and Democratic Services to confirm.
Kenna, I mean, I'll say it again. I think, if we was to have a vote in the chamber tonight, it would be 3-3, which would achieve nothing. If I could, can I just ask Ollie his opinion? Ollie, if I can come to you and ask you, because you're sitting there patiently.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Look, I think a lot of good points have been made, and I think clearly this needs to go in as part of a process. And look, I think what people have to understand is, as a scrutiny committee, we don't have powers to make demands. We don't have powers to force things into the process. What we do have the power to do is just set out and sort of lay out very clearly what our kind of expectations are. My expectations are that we should be doing planning around a new A&E equipped local hospital, and also we should be setting out expectations on a target of the minimum number of houses we expect to be council or housing association. I mean, I think for those of us that are long in the tooth, you kind of know that when you push something off to a fairly equivocal process and see it disappear into administration in the council, sometimes that doesn't necessarily come back in the form that you want it. So those of us that have been around for a while know that actually sometimes it's important just to say, these are the things I believe in, these are the things that I think it's important for us to see as part of that process. Now, I think as members rightly said, it's not for us to dictate that full process as the scrutiny committee. Clearly, there are other decision-making parts of this authority that will ultimately take those decisions and will outline the way forward for this plan. But for me, I think it's important just to spell out those 2 points that I feel are a crucial part of how this process should be formed. And clearly, as a scrutiny committee, all we can say is how we think it should be taken forward, rather than actually driving exactly what the details of the process will be. So I think that's where I would be, Chair. I don't think people have made invalid points. I think all the contributions across the chamber have been logical, and I think people have made good points in terms of how this proceeds, but I think that's just on balance where I would pitch it.
Absolutely, Councillor Gerrish. I do believe across party we should be working together, especially on healthcare. Is something I think we all hold kind of dear to our heart. And like I say, we've got very different views on things, but I'm sure we can kind of come together on this particular subject. Councillor Kerrin.
And if it is a draw, Chair, then your casting vote decides. So I just thought I'd
I'll just add to that, Councillor Kerrin. Now, last time I sided with Labour was in the Health and Wellbeing Committee, was to take a flawed consultation of Alsett Hospital back to the Secretary of State. And I voted with Labour, and subsequently it put back the delivery, really, of the first health hub, which would have been in Tilbury. So I kind of feel, although I made the right decision at the time, it wasn't ideally the right decision, if that makes sense. I want to see the delivery of these health hubs sooner rather than later, to cope with the current health need, and the current health need at the moment is absolutely terrible, because you've got doctor surgeries now that don't really want to see you. They want to do a telephone consultation or and diagnose you over the telephone, which I think's all wrong, really. So is this the type of healthcare that we're going to see in this COVID world we're in now? Are more people going to die as a result of it through not getting correct healthcare? Missing appointments. I've even spoken to someone today regarding chemotherapy that's been missed as well. So do we let this happen, or do we step up and provide a healthcare that is, like I said to Andy, A1 standard for everyone in Thurrock? Kenna?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Kerrin's right. Obviously, two additional recommendations were put forward to the committee, so we do need to have a vote on whether you accept them or not. We can do that in bulk. Everyone, we've been talking about it. I'm sure everyone's aware of what the two of them are. It can be a very simple, the additional recommendations, those in favour, hands, and we can also make a note of it, get it minuted, and also we can move forward with the debate if everybody's happy with that.
Yeah, if you'd like to do that then, Forrest can.
Thank you. So as I said, obviously everyone's aware of Councillor Gerish's additional recommendations, unless they want me to read again, or we can go straight to the vote.
Yeah, if we can have a for and an against.
I'm just going to keep an eye, obviously, that I can see Councillor Gerish as well. But those in favour of the two recommendations, can I just see a show of hands, please? Bear with me just 1 second.
Excuse me, I thought we was going to vote for them separately. You said in favour of the two.
Yeah, Councillor, what we mean is that you take the recommendations on. So instead of officers going out to consultation and obviously seeing whether this is possible with the service providers, this is obviously so that you accept them as they are. So you can do them on bulk within accepting them.
Are we voting on the hospital and the housing?
So on accepting both recommendations, yes.
Well, I thought we said we could split it.
We're voting on whether we vote on them.
Oh, right. Sorry about that.
So whether you, so that we're basically, that you accept those recommendations, and then also we can go in and we can go to them in a bit more detail and say whether or not you do them separately, and basically whether or not you accept them, if that makes sense. And I had 3 show of hands. Is that still correct? And those against? Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenna. All right.
So if I just go into so agreeing with the recommendations, there was 4 members against 2 members. So in that case, you accept those recommendations. They have, obviously they will go forward. I think it's important, obviously, that members still have, whether you want to go into any more detail with those chairs, obviously down to you.
In terms of the work programme that we've got, Kenna, when can we credibly place this on the future work programme without, putting too much on?
Thank you, Chair. I think the officer said there's an update in December. I would have thought that might be easier, if that's okay with officers.
Andy, would that give sufficient time for you senior officers to go away and have that dialogue with the health providers and stuff? 3 months, I understand, yeah?
December, I think with lead time and agendas, October is a bit tight. That's my point. So I think when you come to the work programme, Chair, there are a couple of amends maybe to the December meeting anyway, looking at the items there. We can come to that in a moment, but I do think December is probably more realistic for the report back on engagement with and views of the health authority.
Yes, I agree.
Authorities, should I say?
Yeah. Would we all be in agreement to that? Councillor Kerrin?
So you put in another recommendation, Chair?
No, are you happy? I'm saying, are you happy with it coming back in December?
Yeah, I mean, we've voted for a recommendation, and I think that would probably be on the work programme, wouldn't it, where we'd agree that, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great. Is there any more on this, or did Councillor Van Dijk, did you? No. Councillor Gerish, did you? Any last note? No, we're okay then. All right then, we'll move on then. We'll move on to the work programme, I do believe. Kenna, would you like to tell us what's in store for us in the oncoming meetings?
Thank you, Chair. I won't go into too much detail because obviously the work programme is in front of members. It would just be whether or not there was anything additional you would like to see come forward. Thank you.
Right, I have got three. Number one be a full report of the A13 progress and the overall impact that it's having on both Thurrock's road network, and a full financial update would be fantastic. And also, I'd like in that report a credible estimated finish date on the project, on the A13 widening, before any LTC links are included to that programme. Yeah. Number two, I would like to also see a report on the proposed new lorry parks that are proposed, I do believe. And once I've finished, Andy, if you could elaborate on that. Do you obviously know about these proposed lorry parks?
Sorry, Chair, could you elaborate?
I do believe as a part of Brexit that there would be a series of proposed lorry parks to help with the import and export businesses around the borough.
Chair, I'm aware that there's a national need to look at various Brexit impacts. Lorry parks likely to be part of that, but as I understand it, the various bits of legislation that the government are looking to put together would see them, in effect, like the Lower Thames Crossing, have more direct powers to see these provided. So that's my broad understanding.
I mean, obviously, if these lorry parks are going to come to our borough, again, it'll be the overall impact that these will have on Thurrock and its road networks. You know, so I mean, if you could look into that a little bit more for me, Andy, I'd appreciate that. And the last one, I think I've already said about it, a report on the proposed new planning laws. You know. And again, the impact that this will have on Thurrock, which I touched on with you, Lee. Can they be fitting? Yeah, brilliant. Right, so that's about it, I do believe. Councillor Curran?
Thank you, Chair. Can I suggest some things for the work programme, please?
Absolutely. If you run it by Kenna, and she'll say yay or nay.
Thank you. Thank you for your indulgence again, Chair. Firstly, I think you could tell the interest I had with the Preston model from earlier, and I'd really like to see a sort of detailed report on that, particularly with many more specifics of all the institutions and businesses and bodies within Thurrock who are going to be involved in that. There's also something which, in the last meeting, there was a suggestion from the portfolio holder who attended at the time that we need to, it's in the minutes, that we need to have an item on build, because there's 4 major projects coming to Thurrock. And I think, out of respect for that recommendation, out of respect for the portfolio holder's wishes, I think that should be an item, build, or about the 4 specific projects. That'd be good to get some information on that. And finally, just going back to what you said at the beginning of the meeting, Chair, about the fact that you invited senior officers to come here and to answer specific questions on the A13. I don't think they should be able to ignore the chair of a planning and overview scrutiny committee. And I think out of respect to you, we should insist that they come. Because I think, what does it say about the committee if, senior officers can just say, no, thank you, we're not coming. So I would certainly support you, Chair, if you insist on that appearance taking place as an item in one of the future meetings.
Well, thank you both for your support Thank you, and thank you for your input tonight, each and every member. Councillor Van Day.
Agreeing with you, giving you support.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. It's much appreciated, and I haven't bored the socks off you tonight. It's been, I feel that it's been, quite a good meeting. We've touched on some raw subjects there, really, and ones what are close to each and every one of our hearts, really.
Well, that's what we're here for, isn't it? To debate. We don't have to agree all the time, but we can put the options.
But again, Councillor Van Day, I cannot stress enough that we're not here for ourselves. We're here to represent the people of Thurrock, and not our parties. So we're put here by them. They have invested their trust in us to be their voice. So that is what we need to be, and we need to be here to overview and scrutinise. And that's what each and every one of us is doing. So well done all. Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Gerrish. So if we're all happy, I'll conclude the meeting at 21:10 tonight. And again, thank you, officers, for attending. And thank you, Kenna. That's the meeting to close. Thank you.